Hey guys, it's Hannah and this is Bookworms Talk. And today we're going to talk about 10 Tiny Breaths by K.A. Tucker. This book will touch your heart and it will make you laugh and it'll just make you feel this wide range of emotions that I didn't think I would feel going into this. Everybody warned me, you'll need a box of tissues for this book, and I was kind of like, okay, maybe, and I didn't fully grasp the amount of tissues that you guys suggested I should buy. I think I need to have like a box system. How many boxes of Kleenex do you think I will need? 1, 2, 20? 20. But it is so witty in the way that it deals with this really deep subject matter of life after loss. But it still manages to be funny and witty, and maybe not in the most conventional terms, but it was the weirdest thing to laugh. It's like a dry sense of humor. This is such an incredible story, and I'm going to give you guys a summary about it, and then I will jump into the spoilers, but I will warn you beforehand. This is a story about Casey Cleary, who had lost her mother, her father, her best friend, and her boyfriend in a car accident that she was in with them. It was a drunk driving accident, and her whole right side of her body was crushed, and she had to go through extensive rehabilitation just to regain the ability to walk. She has never quite dealt with the loss of everything, and she hasn't found good coping mechanisms. So Casey and her younger sister Livy live with their Aunt Darla and their Uncle Raymond, and they're quite devout religiously. And Livy tries to make everything so easy for her Aunt Darla and her Uncle Raymond, while Casey does the exact opposite. She gets into drugs and sex and violence and drinking, and her younger sister Livy is about 15 years old. Their Uncle Raymond, who squandered all of their inheritance from their parents in gambling, rubs up against her, and then Livy just runs into Casey's room crying, and she's furious about it. And so basically they leave and they go to Miami. Casey is just, she's gonna figure something out. She's gonna get a job and she's gonna take care of Livy, and she's gonna make sure Livy gets to school and goes to Princeton like her parents wanted her to. And she has just taken on the role of caretaker. She's so internalized and so angry, and her coping mechanism is kickboxing, and so she's almost very violent in that way, and she doesn't try. She doesn't think she has room in her heart for any kind of friendship, nor does she really want it. Casey doesn't want to let anybody in, but then she becomes friends with her neighbor Storm. And then there's this guy next door who their landlord said rushed in, very similar to her situation. He wanted to pay in cash, and he did it all over email, and so we think maybe he is running from something too. And his name is Trent. There's that little bit of romance there as well. But then there's that whole big thing of friendship and this bigger picture of life after loss and this grieving process that she's refused to go through. We get to see how Casey handles things and this new life, and she gets this new job to try to pay, and she just tries to put everything and piece it back together. So much is unveiled to us. It's such a slow pace, and it keeps you interested. Now I want to talk about the details, so I will see you guys later when you have read it. Like I said, a box of like 20 tissues. You don't think you'll need it? You'll need it. I promise. You'll probably cry halfway through. And then about that halfway mark, that's where the other 19 boxes come in handy. So get those. And I will see you guys later next time on Bookworms Talk. Bye. So in these apartments, and there's a snake in the shower, and she screams bloody murder, and then Trent busts through 2 doors and gets her out of the shower, and she's naked, and that whole thing. That I was like, am I reading this right? This is happening, it's totally happening. Yeah, and then they had this conversation after. He's like, isn't it exhausting? She's like, what? Keeping people out. And that is exactly what she does, and he called her on it. So Casey gets a call from the police while she's at Penny's, and it's Livy, and she's watching Mia, and she's like, there's some guy trying to break down the door, and he's crazy, and we find out later that it's Mia's father, Damon, who was really deep into drugs. And so Storm, Casey, Nate, and Kane all go down to the apartments, and then they get there, and Livy had hit Damon over the head with a frying pan, and Trent went in there and protected them. When we were told that he was from New York, and she was from Chicago, they're pretty Chicago, New York-ish. They're kind of far apart, you know? So that was what kept me from thinking maybe he was in the car accident too, because when we had the whole scene where she saw the tattoo on his back that said forgiveness, and I think he was in a similar situation to hers, like he was the person that was driving drunk and killed a family in a car. I thought that was sort of what it was, because I felt like he was almost hurt by the way that she didn't get the forgiveness and healing when he left after she told him what she thought of Cole because he was the one that made this choice, that gave his keys to his friend that he knew was drunk and was blaming him and saying how she hopes he has his miserable life. And he could even begin to feel how she has been affected by this and how Livy has been affected by this whole accident and the loss of everything. And then he leaves and I thought, he was in the car. It makes too much sense. He was gone for 20 days. That had to have been some sort of directly affected by what she said and not just, I was that drunk driver that killed some family. No, it was this circumstance. When Trent asked her what the 5 ravens were on her leg, I never once counted. I just automatically assumed, oh, they're for everybody that died in the accident. So her mother, her father, her boyfriend, and her best friend, that's 4, and then the 5th is for her. I was so confused why he's forcing her to go to not just some sort of therapy session, like fully researched out PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, therapy session group thing. It was how specific it was that raised a slight red flag to me. I was just trying to deny it to myself. Didn't want to think about it being true because I thought that will just be so awful. But it makes so much sense now because that's what helped him. And so he was trying to help her so much. But she tells him, what do you want to hear? That my mother, my father, my best friend, and my boyfriend died in a car accident and I walked away? And then she just tells him to leave. And then that guy at Penny's that tries to kill Storm, and then she's just going after him with a broken bottle. She's ready to kill him, and then Nate drags her away and then clicks with her. I would have killed him. And Trent was right, and that's when she realized it, that she does need some kind of help. And then Trent sees her and she's just like, he must hate me. So then he takes her back to her place and she asks him to stay, and he does. And they sleep, and she has another nightmare, and she takes her clothes off and she's going to shower, and then he comes up behind her, and all of his resolve from before kind of fails because if you remember, he wanted to take it so slow with her because he didn't want to harm her. And I think he didn't want to become that coping mechanism as well. Not only that, but because he realized what he has done to her and he didn't want to make her fall so completely. But then he sleeps with her and he says, I'll make you whole again, I promise. And then that's the next morning when she tells him exactly what she wishes would happen to Cole, and then that's when he leaves for 20 days. He just left and he comes back and he's like, I promise it won't happen again. I want to know what happened, where you were. And she didn't ask those questions. All of this bullshit, it's so hypocritical because he asks her about her past, like a lot, and it's painful for her, but she doesn't ask him shit about his. And he says, yeah, I have a dark past too, and she doesn't ask him that. And then when she accuses him of being Cole when his parents are there, and he says, I just wanted to make you happy again, Casey. It's the only way I can fix it. And it makes so much sense now, him saying, like, I just want to make you smile when they went on their first date, and that's just what he wanted so bad for her. Then she's in the hospital in Chicago, and then Trent's father, Carter, comes and talks to her. And he explains that 2 years after the accident, they found him in the garage with the car running and a hose attached to the tailpipe. And they thought that they lost him that night, and just, I never thought the guilt that would go along with that. It didn't click with me because I was too busy thinking of what she lost. And then he continues to explain that they took Trent to Dr. Stainer's inpatient program for post-traumatic stress, and then they released him after they thought he was well, and he kept in contact with his parents, and then 6 weeks ago, it looked like he was having a relapse, and he appeared on his mom's doorstep, mumbling something about how you'll never forgive him. We brought him back and admitted him to Dr. Stainer, and that is why he never contacted her when he was gone for those 20 days. It was 6 weeks ago that happened. That is why. That is why. But he said that when Trent left 2 years ago, he did so with the belief that he could fix her life. And then he would be forgiven for all the pain that he had caused. And he's like, my son had been watching you from a distance for 2 years, Casey, biding his time until he approached you. I don't know what it was. I didn't really get this creepy stalker factor. He was on a mission to fix her. And that explains why he was trying to force her to get help, because I thought that making her talk about it would work because he was basically trying to be her therapist. And Casey has this really big issue because she does admit that she loves Trent, but he murdered everyone in her life and her own, and she just can't bring herself to still love him because he's Cole. And then Dr. Stainer talked to her about the accident was a result of a horrible, stupid mistake. And then he asks of her to put herself in his shoes, and she can't forgive him for that. And then they have their very unconventional one-way mirror thing where Trent is on the other side talking to her, but she can't talk to him. He can't see her. And he says, I thought that making you fall in love with me would fix everything else I had done to you. I thought I could make you happy, Casey, happy enough that if you ever did find out, you'd be okay with it. And I don't understand how she ever would be okay with that, but I get how it worked out in his head. And then when she was talking to Dr. Stainer about her mother's 10 tiny breaths, and she was asking what he thought that they meant, and he's just like, what do you think that they mean? But then she comes to the realization finally after all of this time. Do you think it matters if they're tiny or deep, he asked. Well, if they're not tiny breaths and they're not deep breaths, then they're just breaths. Then you're just breathing for the sake of breathing. Seize them, feel them, love them. I bolt upright. A weird, calming sensation flows through my body as the answer dawns on me. It's so simple. God, it's so fucking simple. It's just breathing. And then she gets out and she's back with Livy, and Carter had paid for all of her treatment. But the fact that Carter calls every other Sunday to check on Livy and talk to her, and it's almost like a father figure. Then Casey finally empathizes with Trent for all the grief that he must feel, and she talks to Dr. Stainer and says, please tell him I forgive him. Officer Dan and Storm are together, and then they have this big beautiful beach house because he inherited money from his grandmother, so they live there. And Casey and Livy live there too. Casey is just walking the beach one day, and then suddenly Trent is there, and Livy had asked him to come. And then he says how she set him free by forgiving him. And then we get the epilogue. So 3 years later, down the road, Storm is married to Dan, and she's pregnant with another girl, and they live in their beautiful beach house, and Livy's going to Princeton, and Trent moved back to Miami like 5 minutes from Storm's, and Casey's in school. Because I remember that one conversation that she had with Kane, and she's like, oh yeah, for school it's more for my sister, because she never thought of herself being able to do that. And she's studying for psychology, and she's going to specialize in post-traumatic stress therapy. And it's just a beautiful ending, and then it ends with something to the effect of, and he kept his promise to me, he's made me smile every day. And so now I am reading Bad Things by R.K. Lilly. Yes, I have finally caved. But while I'm in Florida, I will be reading On the Island. I'm so excited about that. So I will talk to you guys later next time on Bookworms Talk. Bye!